So, Ayinde, what do you want to talk about today?
I have a very interesting topic. It's something that is usually on my mind for various reasons, and we'll get into some. But the whole idea of the algorithm, and in particular, avoiding the algorithm. And as we get into it, we'll see what I mean.
Avoiding the algorithm. Interesting. That's interesting. Today I'm going with some basic learnings that business owners should know, and I want to ask the question: what are 4 things business owners should know before making content? 4 very simple things, but things people often overlook.
Right. So specifically before making content.
Before you start, yes. Before you start.
Okay. So you're going like 4 things business owners should know, like don't leave your job.
No, that wouldn't be wise at all. Yeah. So before.
All right. Yeah. Well, let's go.
I was thinking about several topics to do this week, and as I mulled over it, one of the things I began to do in recent time on LinkedIn is I said, you know what, I'm just going to share some of my thoughts. Part of being a thought leader or being someone who builds authority is that you don't always have to have these scripted things. You don't always have to have these things where you write it down, double check it 3 and 4 times. You should just be able to share thoughts off the top of your head based on your experience, based upon the things you've done, based upon what's happening in your business or in your space right now, based on things you see in the industry, in your industry. And so I began to share some of those things. And as I began to share some of those things, I thought to myself, well, people may want to do that too. And even though they are doing it spontaneously, they should have some kind of guardrails as to how to share content. And I had done a piece of content before talking about things that business owners should know before creating content. So I revisited that, and I did a little tweaks and a little updates, but it pretty much is an evergreen piece of content. So I want to share those things today. So let's start with number 1. And the first thing a business owner should determine before they start sharing content is, what does your business actually need? And that leans heavily into what are your goals for the content that you're going to make. And let me ask you a question, Ayinde. What do you think are some of the goals that a business owner can have if they are making content?
Well, as a true marketer, you're always going to consider a question like that in context. So it has to depend on the brand. It depends on where they're at as a business. If they're in a growth phase, if they're in a plateau, who they're talking to, who their target audience is. A lot of those things will impact that kind of decision making. But I can say generally, when it comes to creating content, some of your goals could be awareness,
Right.
thought leadership,
Right.
and quite frankly, sales. Businesses don't survive without sales. So even if your content strategy does not immediately prioritize sales like a 1-to-1 ratio, ultimately you want to be able to either inbound clients or reach clients one way or the other. But it must, at some point in time, your activity has to end up in sales, or you're running a charity or a non-for-profit.
Yeah, I mean, that's not what a business is. It's not a charity. One of the things that always really stands out to me about people who run businesses is that people right now in what's happening in the marketing world is that people are making a very, very big deal about personal brands and how personal brands can impact your business.
Right.
And I think what is being made less of a deal is that brands are actually unique too. So your company is unique. The thing that you're building out is unique. What people know your overall brand as is unique. Not your personal brand, not you as the individual, maybe who might be the leader of the company or the CEO or whatever, but the brand itself. If you have a sporting goods company, if you have an insurance company, what is that brand about? And people are placing so much emphasis upon personal brands that they're forgetting that their brand actually has a personality, it has needs, it has to be unique as well. And part of what you're doing is that you're crafting that too. So you mentioned just now, what does your brand need? What does your business need at that point in time? Does it need inbound leads? Do you need to build brand awareness? Do you need actual sales, which is like performance marketing? Do you need to put something out in order to get sales on this particular day. Those things will determine things like your content volume, your messaging. It may determine if you don't really need to put out content and if you just need to run ads instead. So that what your business actually needs is very, very important. Like it comes in the category of what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish with this particular content? And everybody who makes content should be clear about that. And usually that comes in the form of I'm trying to reach people, this type of people with this type of content to accomplish this. Normally it comes in the form of it's structured something like that. But that's the number one thing that I think, not the number one thing overall, but the first thing on my list of things that a leader of a business or a business owner should know before they start creating content. Like, what are my goals? What does your business actually need right now? And the obvious elephant in the room with this one is that your business always needs to make money. So the answer to that question cannot just be to make money. It has to be more specific than that. Yeah.
Yeah. As you talk about what you need to do right now, what you need to achieve right now. However, I'm wondering if in the back of their minds, there also has to be, well, how does this impact my long-term strategy? And if you always have to have those two things in the right balance, because you can do some stuff that is going to impact you right now. Like if you say, right now, I need awareness. I am sure if you started dancing on top of your car in the middle of Frederick Street, I'm sure JumaBannister.com will blow up. But does that help your long-term strategy? So I'm just adding in that. I'm agreeing with you and added in that little piece that you have to balance it with your long-term, what you need now, but also what's the long-term strategy.
It's interesting that you should mention that because that feeds into the second point I have to make. But also I would say that that's a real good point. That's a real good point. You're going to get a lot of attention. But then again, if one of your goals is to make money, you might not get that. You know, people might end up not liking the brand and saying, this brand is a foolish brand. Or what's going on here with this thing? It depends on what type of attention. Not all attention is made the same. Not all attention is equal. Not all attention helps you accomplish your goals. And so the issue always is, can you build trust in a category that you want to be known for? Can you build trust in the space that you want to be known for? Can people say, I'm going to come to you for this thing and I expect to get this thing consistently all the time in this way at this level? And so attention is not equal to trust. So that's a good point that you're making. I will not be dancing on my car anytime soon. So you can be assured of that. So the second thing that business owners should know before they start creating content, and this is like on the level of them making content for their business and in the context also of probably small and micro enterprises, is what type of content do I actually enjoy making? What is something that I enjoy making? Because if you don't enjoy it, it's highly likely that you won't do it.
Yeah.
If you don't enjoy doing it, it's highly likely that you won't do it. And I have to ask you the question, do you have any personal anecdotes with regard to this one, Ayinde? Is there any type of content that you... It was a loaded question. Okay. It might be.
In a particular kind of way, I think doing certain kinds of video content for me requires, the requirements are to like put in some extra work and consistency. And while I'm not averse to being on camera, which is usually, most people have that issue, like they don't want to be on camera, they don't like how they sound. I don't like how I sound either. I don't really listen to some of these videos at all. However,
really?
being on camera is not shocking. The big issue. The issue is consistency in terms of planning for the video. And I'm going to drop that, but I'm also going to drop how I can overcome some of that. Some of that can be overcome with systems because you talked about wanting to do it. Sometimes you have to kind of dig down and figure out why it's difficult. And sometimes it's location, sometimes it's proximity, sometimes it's how do I make this thing as easy as possible, as simple as having this setup in place. So right now, to jump on this live, I have to flick 1, 2, 3 buttons. light, microphone, camera, literally. I turn on those three things and I sit down, and then I could have this conversation with you. If I had to set up a light stand, set up a tripod, tweak the lights, make adjustments here, make adjustments there. If I had to do all of that, it would be less likely that you will do it with the frequency that you need to do it. Yeah. So that's one of the things that come to mind. I might have some others hiding somewhere, but that's one that comes to mind.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So that, you made a good point there. So how easy it is to do might actually feed into how enjoyable it is to do.
Mm-hmm.
So having a setup like this setup that I have here or you have there, we don't really have to do much. Everything is basically set up already. We just have to sit and record. So it's not a lot of lead up or stress that goes into doing this. But I could also argue that you don't really need to do a lot. If you have your phone and you're outside, you could record anywhere. I think a lot of the blockage is internal, particularly for video. But the nice thing about it is that when you're choosing the type of content you want to make, you're not limited to video. If you love writing, you can write. If you love doing these short kind of punchy posts, you can do that. If you want to do long form content, you can do that. If you want to do graphics, you can do that. You're not limited in the type of content that you can make. But if you don't like doing it, if it's too hard to do, if it's not something that you feel fulfilled in doing, it's highly likely that you won't do it. And then there's the other aspect of that where you just have to push through and do it enough until you get to the third point that I'm going to make, which I will get into right now. And the third thing that business owners need to do before they make content is they need to know what are they good at or what do they want to get good at, because you might want to make video and you're not particularly good at making video. You might want to be a writer, but you're not particularly good at writing. So if there's something that you're good at, you may want to start off there in your content creation journey. And then obviously you have to, if there's something else that you want to get good at, then you have to practice those things in order to get to the point where the content is good or where you can share things in a way that people will see value in it. So it doesn't mean if you're not good at it, because nobody starts off good, by the way. Everybody starts off terribly. It doesn't mean because you're not good at it, you shouldn't do it. But what you should have in your mind is that I have this particular goal that I want to accomplish. And in order for me to get there, I have to practice this thing over a period of time. And then I will get better at it. And people will start to see the value in anything that I do. Normally, your first 10, 20, 50, 100 videos are really terrible. Maybe you're writing. Your first articles are going to be terrible. Maybe you're doing graphics. You might follow a template or two. You might end up in Canva. And it's not really the thing you exactly want. But over time, you develop the skill. And as you develop the skill, you do it better. And as you do it better, people begin to see more value in it. And therefore, it begins to accomplish the goals that you want to accomplish. I think the problem is with a lot of people is that they don't really want to go through that process.
Yeah. I think you're so correct in what you're saying, and a lot of times people just have to start, but it's important to start with a clear goal in mind, like a clear developmental path in mind, like a clear trajectory. You should have a clear trajectory. You shouldn't start and say, well, this is all I could do, this, and you flatline immediately. You're just staying at the bottom here. If you have a clear trajectory, then it's okay to just start. So just starting might mean talking on your phone in your car, but you have in your mind, oh, I'm going to develop these skills. I'm going to be able to take it to this level. I'm going to spend more time scripting. I'm going to spend more time doing research. I'm going to spend more time thinking about the value. And so you have a clear trajectory or developmental path in mind. But it's very important to just start, I think. A lot of times it's just important to start. And one of the thoughts from the previous point you were making is important to just get the track record in place.
Mm-hmm.
Just get the track record in place. So like if you have to do 15 videos, those 15 videos are not just going to say you have created 15 videos. They're going to be 15 opportunities for you to learn.
Yeah.
And each opportunity to learn should lead to some kind of improvement in the delivery of your content, whether it's written content, video content, audio content, producing a podcast, doing a video podcast, whatever it is, by the time you do a certain amount of it, you should have become better at doing it. Because there's one thing to learn theory and to understand something, and there's a whole different set of learning that takes place, like more neural learning that takes place when you actually do the thing.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. And I would say skill brings efficiency. Skill brings efficiency. When you're strong at a format, your content is created faster. You get more efficient at doing it. And so actually doing it is the only way to do it. And I remember when we had to move into our new house and we were living in the old house, and my wife, I began to pack stuff up because we house available now. We need to move in. And she's saying, we really move in? And I said, girl, the only way to move is to move, you know. You gotta start to move. You gotta pack things in a box and put it in the vehicle and go to the next place and put it down there. So there's no question about what needs to take place. And sometimes the only way to make content is to make content. Sometimes that's what's going on. But I would say go back to point one and come up with some type of plan, something as to why you're making this in the first place. And that will help you along your way. So it wouldn't just be making anything and everything, because that is counterproductive, actually. So important to remember. Right. And so the fourth thing I would say that business owners need to know, or they need to think about, need to consider before they start making content is, how much time do I realistically have? How much time do I realistically have? One of the, like, it has to be probably the thing we hear the most from people who run businesses and from CEOs is that I don't have time. I simply do not have time. I mean, understand, we get it. You're running a business, you have responsibilities, you're managing a team, you're doing all those other different things that is happening. And in order for you to make stuff, it's going to take effort, it's going to take sacrifice. But part of what you need to understand is that if you go back to point one, which is, if this is part of your plan, is part of your long-term strategy, as you mentioned, Ayinde, then it becomes more imperative that you set the time to do it. You actually put it on your calendar. And your first attempts might take forever. Like when you start to record a video, you start to write, you might do 15 different drafts, or you might try to record a video 10 times and it just wouldn't go as well as you think it should go. But eventually, over time, as you invest more time, you eventually get that time back. The more time you invest on the front end, the more you get back later on. When I first started to create content on LinkedIn, I basically put out a video every day for a whole year. Now I don't do that anymore. Now I probably put out a video probably twice a week, and I write one when I want. But because I've invested so much in the front end, the returns are coming in now. Right. And so you have to say, I need to dedicate time to this for this period. And I usually call that period like a year, 12 months. Right. You dedicate your time to making this thing for a year. You get good at it. You getting to be known on the platform. You get to fine tune what you're saying. You get the reach that you think you're that you want to get. And so it sets you up for this long-term or longevity inside of the past social media, inside of the spaces that you want to be known in your industry. It sets you up well if you dedicate a lot of time up front. So that's something that I think business owners should do. Yeah.
What it makes me think about this YouTuber by the name of Casey Neistat. You would know about Casey Neistat. People may or may not know about Casey Neistat. But I use this example a lot sometimes when I'm teaching. And when he started creating content for YouTube, his frequency was maybe like once every 2 weeks. He did very good videos. Like, he's a filmmaker, so had a fairly popular show on HBO, even though it was just for one season. So he's a very good filmmaker. So he would take his time. He would do certain types of short videos for YouTube. But there was a certain point in time where he decided, and I can't remember if he explained why he decided, but he decided to do a daily vlog. He decided to create a video every day. And he did this for 3.5 years. And he went from, like, when I started following Casey Neistat, he probably was in the tens of thousands, like 60,000 followers, that kind of thing, which was decent for a YouTuber. When he started the daily vlog, however, this guy hit the million so quickly. Like, he went from 1 million to 3 million to 5 million. By the time he decided, okay, daily vlogs is too much stress on the family and so on, he was in excess of 8 million subscribers. But this is the part that I want to come to that supports what you're saying. Subsequent to that, he would have slowed down dramatically in terms of his production. I think he moved to LA or Texas, or he moved for a while out of New York. New York was his base. He moved for a while, so the number of videos he produced were far and in between. But what I always noted was he had done such a good job front loading value with his subscribers that if he drops a video today, 6 months since his last video, he would routinely get anywhere between 350,000 to 500,000 views within the hour of dropping the video. And I think that speaks to some of what you're doing. Once you've kind of established that trust and you've established that track record as a CEO, as a business, it becomes more fluid in terms of the way you create content and when you deliver content. So there is benefit, and that example gives credence to the fact that there is benefit to front loading your content volume to give yourself more flexibility on the back end once you've built that trust.
And I agree with that. And I think that just like Casey, all you need to do is be careful of what that impacts, because it could have fallout, right? And his fallout was beginning to be his family. And so he had to, but understand the level at which he was producing at was a high level.
Yeah.
Wasn't just like sit down and do a talking head video. There was B-roll, there was drone shots, there were cutaways, there was voiceovers, it was him filming himself. It was very deep. It was something that a normal person could not do. You don't have to do what Casey Neistat did, particularly if you have a business, but just doing the content, like recording yourself or whatever it is. Just getting the volume up is the way you should start, and front loading, very, very important. After a while, you could taper off, but that front loading is pretty important. So I agree with that. All right, Ayinde, that's me. What do you have that you want to talk about?
Yeah, so as I said at the beginning of the conversation, I want to talk about algorithms a little bit. It's something I think about myself. Like, from a personal perspective, I have a vested interest in how the algorithm works. Not just for me personally, but also because I have teenage daughters. And my personal philosophy has been, how can I avoid the algorithm? I don't want the algorithm telling me what to think. So those are some of the thoughts that I've been having, and living in a world where the algorithm doesn't rule you. Now, we know that when it comes to digital marketing, and in particular social media and content marketing, the algorithm is very important because you depend on the algorithm to put your content in front of other people. So you get this reality where content creators are creating for the algorithm. So they're making decisions based on how this algorithm is going to treat with their content. And the thought that came to mind, is it possible for businesses to avoid the algorithm and still do well at digital marketing? So that is kind of where the conversation begins. And so somebody might ask, well, what do you mean by avoiding the algorithm? Because it's almost impossible to avoid the algorithm. I think for a business, because for an individual it might be different, but for a business, it means not building your entire digital marketing strategy on social media and on social media algorithms. Yeah, so that you don't end up living and dying by the algorithm. So one of the issues, I think, I started doing some research and then listening to some videos of different people who kind of had similar thoughts about avoiding the algorithm. And one of the issues that arise is that when you create content for social media and you are dependent on the algorithm to show your content or to give you that reach and give you that awareness, it feels almost like you're renting that awareness. So if you don't keep producing, and chasing their attention, it will die off. So if your business depends on you chasing attention, it means then even you as a CEO or a company, it means you're constantly in a space where, oh, I have to create new content. I have to create new content. Engagement is down. Awareness is down. How do I reach new people? And you get into this hamster wheel of creating new content. There's a recent statistic that says 75% of creators are burnt out. Now, these are creators. Their job is to create content. What about you when you're CEO of a company or you're marketing manager of a company and digital is only part of your job and you're getting burnt out creating content? And then the other issue is that you're competing not against other humans, you're competing against AI. So AI can crank out some types of content very quickly, very fast, very easily. So then how do you compete with that level of attention? So that's a consideration for businesses. And I'm not saying my thoughts are the answers. These are some of the things that I've been thinking about. Maybe I will fine tune them and put them in an article on the blog. But these are some of the thoughts I'm having. So we don't want to rent the audience all the time. Now, there are times when going after audiences is important, but how do we own the audience? Yeah. What are some of the digital marketing steps we could take that allow us to own the audience as opposed to rent the audience? Yeah, because we know that there's a lot of competition for attention. It will require constant posting. So those are three issues. Competition for attention requires constant posting, and it has a short life. Social media content has a very short life. So you put effort into producing this thing, but it doesn't live beyond that in a real way. So you have to come again and produce something. Now, is there content that we can produce that has a longer life and therefore allows you to build better relationship, stronger relationship with your target audience? So then, let me get some thoughts on what you think about that position I have in my mind. And then we could kind of talk about some of the things I think businesses can do.
At first, when you began talking, I was wondering if you were referring to non-digital marketing only, like, for example, like billboards and magazine ads and
No?
traditional marketing. I
Right.
thought you might have been leaning into that. But at the end of what you were saying, because you didn't mention about the burnout statistics and how a lot of these creators are burnt out, more than 3/4 of them. You did talk about that, and it got me thinking a couple of things. It got me thinking that it's difficult to do all this stuff.
Yeah.
It really is a challenge to do all this stuff. And avoiding the algorithm means you have to make a decision that you're just not going to do certain things. Now, granted that the current algorithms are heavily interest-based, and we know the history of that. TikTok did this. Everybody found it worked well. People copied them. We know the history behind that, right? But I understand what you're saying, because every time I hear someone say, like when somebody like, for example, we know the popular names like Gary Vee or Alex Hormozi says you have to make this volume of content. My first thing is that, hey, listen, them fellas have teams. Them fellas have teams to handle. They just record and they forget about it because they know they have somebody's going to edit, somebody's going to schedule, somebody's going to post, somebody's going to take this long form content and make 100 clips out of it and put it out there. That is a hard thing to do. It's not as easy as it sounds. But I would like to hear the ways that you're thinking that people can approach content in a different way to avoid the algorithm.
Yeah. I have a couple of them. Well, more than a couple. I have at least 3, maybe 4. So one of the first things I would say, which seems kind of obvious, but people should create content for humans. So prioritize creating content that you think will resonate with an actual person who has an actual issue, rather than thinking about, oh, hashtags, keywords. How do I get the algorithm post on a Monday, post 9 p.m.? And forgetting the most important part, which is ultimately you create the way, to me, the way content works is if people actually consume and engage with the content in a real way, then it's going to work. If you're chasing the numbers and you're chasing the algorithm, it's easy to forget the human aspect of it. So that's one of the things I was thinking about, that you need to, first of all, say, okay, who is the human that I'm making this for? And make stuff for humans. It will actually stand out more, especially in today's AI-driven world and AI-driven content. When something feels like is made by a human for a human, it's going to stand out. And that's one of the things that's very, very difficult to do in today's market, which is to stand out.
But I have a question in there. How
Yeah.
does one do that? How can you make content for humans, essentially? It's kind of weird that we're asking that, because 5 years ago, this would not have been a question. How do you make content for humans? How does one do that?
I think if you prioritize thinking about what the pain points are for the actual person in a particular business, or in a particular scenario or situation based on what you're selling, like really think about what problems they need to solve for, that your product can solve for, and speak to them in that kind of way, in a very natural, organic, human kind of way, without thinking, oh, I have to do 3 posts on a Monday and I have to make
Right.
sure I have these keywords in it. But think about it like, oh, this is my friend, and I want my friend to know these things that's going to help them in their business, help them in their life, help them with their kids, help them lose weight, help them build a business plan. I want them to know this. How do I talk to somebody like that? And kind of take away some of that veneer of, oh, I'm a professional content creator, and just have that reality of, I'm talking to my friend and I want them to do better. It's like a mindset shift as opposed to 10 very specific things. It's like a mindset shift into, I need to be more helpful and useful to my audience and less concerned with gaming the algorithm.
Right.
And it kind of leads to my second point too, is the type of content you create too. So a lot of social media content that chases the algorithm and rents attention is a rented audience. But if you create content for discoverability, then you're not chasing people coming into you. So when I talk about content for discoverability, you're thinking about things that are going to allow SEO to work better, both in terms of Google, YouTube, people searching for certain things. So creating content that when people search, they're going to find you. So you're more discoverable as opposed to using the algorithm to chase attention. Yeah. So you want to create content for discoverability. That a lot of times is going to bring people to your website, and traffic to your website and traffic to an owned piece of real estate, so to speak, is going to mean that you're not going through the third party of social media. So you own that audience. When they come to you, you own that audience. And then you take it to the next step, which is to build relationship. And one of the things you want to do to build relationship is to maintain contact. So you can get them on WhatsApp communities, or you can build email lists and use email marketing a lot more than you would use social media, for example, because creating content and distributing it through your own platform, like your email, allows you to keep in contact and build relationship with your target audience. So you're more human and you're more relationship centric and less algorithmic centric. Yeah. So I think those things will help avoid the algorithm. But it's interesting you talk about going back into IRL, and considering non-digital communication tools, because I think some of them still
Right.
have benefit. And businesses also need to think about that. So at the end of the day, you use the tools that are useful for your product and target market, as opposed to what's trendy. So a lot of people might be, oh, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on TikTok. Really evaluate if that's the best way to reach your target audience. And most times, businesses are going to find that there needs to be a mix, especially some traditional businesses that have been around for a while. There needs to be a mix between digital and traditional marketing. And I think if we mix those two, we'll be well on our way to avoiding the algorithm. Now, I just want to put in a caveat. I'm not saying social media is going away. What I am saying is that when we as marketers shift the focus of our marketing to building long-term relationship, instead of having certain metrics met on social media, then we will position ourselves for more stability. And because when you're chasing attention, there's a lot of instability. If you don't keep on top of it, if you don't, in fact, you're going to end up at the point where you're spending a lot of money advertising, boosting posts to stay at the numbers that have been driving your sales all the time. But if you chase relationship as opposed to chasing the algorithm, what you end up with is stronger relationships, more stable business, stable income, and a better long-term brand, I feel, for your business.
You said a whole lot there.
Yeah.
Let me see if I could pull out some things that you said and add to what you've said. So the first thing, I'll go to the last thing that you said. It seems like you're saying that building a brand right now is very, very, very important. And when you think about brand, don't think about a logo. Don't think about what you see, what you could hear. Think about how people feel about who you are, what people leave with, what's the level of trust that people have in what you're presenting to them. Think about a brand like that. And it seems that you're saying that as opposed to if you only do things in order to get sales, then over time, you'll have to put more and more and more into getting that done. But if you build trust or if you build a brand, then people will stick with you over a long period of time, right? So that's the first thing.
Yeah.
The second thing is that in terms of digital, so the Google framework, which I've spoken about in the past, is the EEAT framework. This is the framework that Google is training AI on in order to know what content it should put in those AI summaries at the top.
Yeah.
So that is experience, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness, like those four things. And I think that if we put what we're making in those categories, and particularly, I want to speak to the experience part of it. There are some things that only experience could give you, only experience and give you these stories to tell, which in fact will make people believe you more. Because if you have real life examples with stories to tell, with examples to back it up, with people you've really helped, with things that have really happened in your business, it gives you a higher level of trust. Therefore, you don't have to run down the algorithm again. And the last thing I'll add about the billboard stuff, the IRL stuff, is that these days I'm really liking billboards. Like I'm really, really liking billboards these days. In fact, part of what idea I had for this very podcast is that I was going to go all the way to the end of the East-West corridor and drive all the way to Port of Spain and count the billboards and categorize them and see what people are actually putting up right now. I'm still probably going to do that. That's going to be a lot of effort on my part for that particular podcast. But I think that I like billboards these days. You know, a lot of stuff is digital, but I like that IRL, looking at very well put together billboards. Not all of them are good, but the good ones, I really, really like them.
Yeah, I still have a soft spot in my heart for signage and billboards in particular. Having come out of that, did that for years. And I agree with you. I think if I had to recommend any non-digital marketing tools, there are only two things that stand out in my mind. And one of them is billboards. The other one is radio in Trinidad. I don't know about radio in the region or radio in other parts of the world, but in Trinidad and Tobago, where we're located, I would still recommend billboards. And I would still recommend radio. Others would have to be very, very specific use cases for other traditional kinds of content and marketing materials. But one of the things I wanted to just touch on before we wrap up is the whole issue of trust. And I think we mentioned that at least in the last podcast. We may have mentioned it in the one before that too. It seems to be a very strong emphasis in this period of time, which is the need for brands and individuals and CEOs to build trust with their target audience, especially online. Because content is so easy to produce now. The value of that content has dropped dramatically. And part of the reason the value of it has dropped is because people don't trust it. It's like you see a video, you don't know if it's AI, you don't know how many, you don't know if the person actually wrote the article, you don't know if this is just a copy and paste from one of the AI chatbots. You don't. So a lot of distrust. And if marketers can find ways to build that trust and to convince people, oh, this is a real human with real issues. So like we didn't have our podcast yesterday because we were dealing with human issues. It's like real things we had to deal with. It's like we're not algorithms. So we have to deal with real things. So I think if brands and businesses can convince people that they are not just human, but they see their customers as human and they see their potential customers as human, that goes a long way towards building trust in the brand and ultimately will lead to a better relationship. There's just too much mistrust and too much content sloshed about out there that people are very concerned and just generally very concerned. And so that trust level is down. So brands now have to be figuring out ways, how can we build trust? What are some of the things we can do to help build trust and drive that long-term relationship?
Yeah, that's very good. So what did we learn today, Ayinde?
I think we learned that we don't have to 100% rely on the algorithm in social media, because long term it's better to have your own audience, to own your audience as opposed to rent your audience. And the other thing that we would have learned is that you can begin to build that owned audience by creating content that drives discoverability. In other words, content that works with EEAT from Google, that drives discoverability. So you're talking about things that live on your website, like a podcast or a blog or articles that live on your website. You're also creating content that could live in your email and using your email strategy as a way to augment your overall digital strategy, because email is largely our owned audience. And anybody who subscribes to you is already interested in your business. It's not like social media where you're going to get 100,000 people viewing this thing, but how many people are actually interested? When you send out an email, you know 100% of those people who are getting that email have already demonstrated interest in your product or service. So I think email is another way we could avoid some of the negatives of the algorithm, so that we connect directly and we own our audience with content that is going to drive trust and help develop relationships, long-term relationships.
Very good. Very good. Yeah. And I think what stood out to me is the whole idea of your business needs to have a goal before you start making stuff. You need to know why are you doing this in the first place, whether it's brand building, whether it's to increase revenue. And that's not just I'm making money with the content. It's not that. You have to go deep and really figure out what does your business actually need in order to be sustained. And this is not a short-term thing. It's something that you want to build for the long term, like strategically. I made that point. It has to be strategic. It has to be something that is connected to your long-term goals as well, even though you might have short-term goals. Another thing that really stood out to me is the fact that if you start making content and you enjoy it, and it's something that you're consistent in doing it, you'll get better at it. So skill brings efficiency into how you make content. And one of the main things is that if you want to get better at it over time, you're really going to have to find time to front load all of this practice.
Yeah.
You have to front load all of this practice, because what you invest in now, the time you invest now in creating or things you do before, are going to pay off later on, maybe 5, 6, 7 years later, as your brand becomes more well known. And at that point, you can decide how you want to throttle your content. Yeah.
All right. Good conversation, Juma.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us on It's Good to Relate today. Don't forget you can get all of the podcast episodes at itsgoodtorelate.com. And we'll see you again very, very soon.
I need a sign off. I don't want to say after you say that. I need a sign off. No, I was just thinking of Russell Simmons.
Oh, okay.
And Def Comedy Jam. They would always call up Russell to sign off. And I believe all he would say is, thank you for coming out. Good night, everyone.
Basically.
Like 3 words. Yeah.
Yeah, I normally have the first word, you have the last word. So you probably need to get a sign off.
Yeah.
You probably did. All right, bye, everyone.
Search on Russell and see what I can come up with. All right, bye, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.